The Christmas lights blurred through my tears as security escorted me past the holiday decorations toward the exit. Just minutes earlier, I had been standing by the punch bowl when my boss, Marcus, suddenly raised his voice above the festive chatter. "So where's that $20,000 bonus?" he asked with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. My stomach dropped. Every conversation in the room stopped. I felt dozens of eyes boring into me as I whispered the truth that would destroy everything. It never hit my account. Dylan, the owner's son, exploded with rage. "Liar, you're fired for hiding company funds." But as I handed over my keycard, I couldn't help but smile. "Good luck with the first quarter launch. Your entire platform goes dark tonight." 3 months earlier, I had walked into the sleek glass offices of Techflow Solutions with genuine excitement coursing through my veins. The offer letter in my purse promised everything I had dreamed of: senior software architect at a cutting-edge tech startup, a base salary that would finally let me breathe, and a $20,000 performance bonus for successfully launching their revolutionary client management platform. After years of corporate drudgery at my previous job, this felt like my chance to make a real impact. Marcus Hendricks had personally recruited me during our interview at a trendy downtown coffee shop. He was a silver-haired man in his 50s who spoke with the passion of someone who had conquered Silicon Valley twice over. His eyes lit up as he described his vision for transforming how businesses managed client relationships. "Sierra," he had said, leaning forward with intensity, "you're exactly the architect we need to make this dream reality. Your background in secure systems design is precisely what will set us apart from every competitor out there." The company buzzed with an energy I had never experienced before. Techflow occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls covered in motivational quotes and whiteboards filled with ambitious projections. Young employees glided between standing desks on electric scooters, their laptops adorned with startup stickers. The kitchen overflowed with organic snacks, craft beer, and an espresso machine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But it was the Zenith Capital partnership that made everyone's eyes shine with dollar signs. Marcus gathered the entire company in the main conference room my second day to announce that Zenith, one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in the country, was prepared to invest $90 million in Techflow. The only condition was a flawless demonstration of our platform's capabilities during the first quarter review meeting. "This is our moment," Marcus declared to thunderous applause. "Zenith Capital doesn't just invest money, they invest in the future. With their backing, we'll expand nationwide, revolutionize an entire industry, and make everyone in this room financially secure for life." I met the key players who would shape my experience over the following months. Dylan Hendricks. Marcus's 28-year-old son served as vice president of operations, despite having zero technical background. He had the kind of confident swagger that came from never facing real consequences for his mistakes. His college friend Samantha Torres ran human resources with an efficiency that seemed more focused on protecting the company than supporting employees. Jake Morrison became my closest colleague in the tech department. He was a lead developer with calloused hands from weekend rock climbing and a genuine passion for clean code. The previous architect left behind a complete disaster. He warned me privately during my first week. "Half the security protocols don't work. The database structure is held together with digital duct tape, and the user interface looks like it was designed by someone who had never seen a computer before." Patricia Walsh, the chief financial officer, remained mysteriously absent from most meetings. When she did appear, she spoke in numbers and percentages that somehow never seemed to add up quite right. Her calculating gaze made me uncomfortable, like she was always measuring everyone's value against some invisible spreadsheet. My enthusiasm dimmed quickly as I dove into the existing platform. What Marcus had described as revolutionary technology was actually a security nightmare waiting to happen. The previous architect had cut corners everywhere, creating vulnerabilities that would make any serious business run screaming in the opposite direction. Password encryption was laughably weak. Client data sat unprotected on shared servers, and the entire system crashed if more than 50 users logged in simultaneously. I began working 18-hour days completely rebuilding the platform's foundation while maintaining the illusion that everything was progressing smoothly. My tiny apartment became a second office as I coded through weekends and holidays, surviving on energy drinks and determination. The work was challenging but satisfying. I was creating something genuinely innovative that could transform how businesses operated. Dylan, meanwhile, began taking credit for my innovations during weekly investor update calls. He would confidently explain technical concepts he clearly didn't understand, using buzzwords he had memorized from industry blogs. When Zenith's technical team asked detailed questions about implementation, Dylan would defer to proprietary processes while shooting me warning glances to stay quiet. The pattern became clear. I would solve impossible technical challenges. Dylan would present my work as his vision, and Marcus would praise his son's leadership while my contributions remained invisible. But I convinced myself that the performance bonus would make the humiliation worthwhile. $20,000 would pay off my credit cards, cover my mother's mounting medical bills, and give me enough financial breathing room to consider my options. Late one Tuesday evening in November, exhaustion finally got the better of my caution. I was debugging a critical data synchronization issue when I accidentally accessed a directory I had never seen before. My heart stopped as I scrolled through financial spreadsheets that painted a very different picture than what Zenith Capital was being shown. The user engagement numbers we reported to investors were inflated by at least 300%. Revenue projections included clients who had never signed contracts. Customer testimonials came from fictional companies with fake websites and stock photo employees. Everything about our success story was carefully constructed fiction designed to deceive sophisticated investors. I sat in the empty office surrounded by the glow of multiple monitors, realizing that my rebuilt platform was about to become the centerpiece of an elaborate fraud scheme that could land everyone involved in federal prison. The discovery haunted my sleep for weeks as I tried to process the magnitude of what I had uncovered. Every morning brought fresh evidence of the deception surrounding me. Client testimonials that Dylan proudly shared during all-hands meetings traced back to websites created just days before investor presentations. The glowing reviews from satisfied customers came from email addresses registered to vacant office buildings in different states. I began paying closer attention during Dylan's presentations to Zenith's representatives, watching their faces as he confidently cited statistics that I now knew were completely fabricated. The demo environment that so impressed potential investors displayed carefully curated fake data, thousands of active users who existed only in our staging database transaction volumes that bore no resemblance to reality, and success metrics that painted Techflow as the fastest-growing platform in the industry. My rebuilt platform had become the technological foundation supporting this house of lies. Every security improvement I implemented, every performance optimization I delivered, only made the fraudulent demonstration more convincing. I felt trapped in a nightmare where my honest work was being weaponized against innocent investors who trusted the integrity of the numbers being presented to them. The promised performance bonus became my lifeline as financial pressures mounted beyond anything I had ever experienced. My mother's cancer diagnosis had brought medical bills that insurance refused to cover completely. Experimental treatments, specialist consultations, and prescription medications consumed my savings with terrifying speed. My credit cards climbed toward their limits as I juggled rent, utilities, student loans, and the crushing weight of healthcare costs. When I finally gathered the courage to approach Patricia Walsh about the overdue bonus payment, her response chilled me to the bone. She barely looked up from her computer screen as she delivered news that shattered my remaining optimism. "There have been some budget adjustments," she said, with the emotional warmth of a tax auditor. "The bonus structure was recalculated based on quarterly performance metrics. You'll need to wait until after the Zenith deal closes before any additional compensation can be processed." I tried to explain my financial situation, the medical emergency that had drained my resources, the commitments I had made based on their written promise of payment. Patricia's expression never changed as she interrupted my explanation with a dismissive wave. "Everyone here is making sacrifices for the greater good of the company. The Zenith partnership will benefit all of us, but only if everyone remains focused on collective success rather than individual concerns." Dylan's behavior toward me shifted dramatically as my desperation became more visible. He began undermining my work in subtle but devastating ways, claiming that my development timeline was behind schedule and over budget. During team meetings, he would casually mention concerns about my productivity while suggesting that personal problems were affecting my professional performance. The whisper campaign against my reputation spread like poison through the office environment. Colleagues who had previously sought my technical advice began avoiding eye contact in hallways. Project managers stopped including me in planning discussions, claiming they needed to streamline communication channels for efficiency. My contributions to code reviews were questioned and criticized by people who couldn't write a basic function themselves. Other employees started treating me like a pariah, believing Dylan's carefully planted suggestions that I was difficult to work with and possibly unreliable. The friendly conversations over coffee disappeared. Invitations to team lunches stopped arriving. I found myself eating alone while former colleagues gathered around Dylan, laughing at jokes that felt pointed and cruel. Jake remained my only genuine supporter, but even he began expressing concerns about the toxic atmosphere surrounding my role. "Something weird is happening here," he confided during one of our brief private conversations. "Dylan's been asking strange questions about your access levels and what systems you work on independently. He seems really interested in understanding exactly what you've built and how someone else might take over your responsibilities." The warning bells in my head grew louder when I discovered that Dylan had been conducting secret meetings with representatives from competing companies. Through careful observation and overheard phone conversations, I pieced together a horrifying picture of his true intentions. He wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was actively planning to sell my proprietary code designs to our biggest competitors. The plan was diabolically simple. After securing the Zenith Capital investment, Dylan would gradually transfer my innovations to outside buyers while building a case for my termination. He would claim that I had stolen company resources and sold trade secrets to competitors using the very code I had legitimately created as evidence of my supposed crimes. The accusations would not only justify firing me without compensation, but would also destroy my professional reputation so thoroughly that no other company would ever hire me. My hands shook as I realized how completely I had been manipulated. Every late night I had spent perfecting the platform, every innovative solution I had developed, every security protocol I had implemented, was being prepared for theft by the very people who had promised me a bright future. They planned to steal my life's work, frame me for corporate espionage, and leave me professionally destroyed while they profited from my creativity and expertise. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial hardship I had endured. These people had looked me in the eye, shaken my hand, and sworn to reward my dedication while secretly planning my destruction. They had exploited my mother's illness and my desperate financial situation to ensure my compliance while they prepared to sacrifice my career for their personal gain. As I sat in my car after another 18-hour day, staring at the Techflow logo illuminated against the night sky, I finally understood that I was completely alone in a battle I had never realized I was fighting. Dylan's campaign against my reputation escalated with the precision of a military operation designed to destroy an enemy's credibility before delivering the final blow. He began scheduling critical project meetings without sending me invitations, then expressing surprise and disappointment when I failed to attend discussions about systems I had personally designed. When I learned about these meetings through other channels and tried to contribute my expertise, he would interrupt with comments about how my absence had forced the team to make important decisions without proper technical input. The project specifications changed almost daily, always without advance notice or documentation. Requirements that had been clearly established weeks earlier would suddenly become outdated approaches that needed complete overhaul. When I completed development work based on the original specifications, Dylan would reject the results as fundamentally misaligned with current business objectives, demanding extensive revisions that consumed precious time and energy. Impossible deadlines became his favorite weapon for demonstrating my supposed inadequacy. He would assign tasks on Friday afternoon that required completion by Monday morning, knowing full well that the work involved complex database restructuring or security implementations that normally took weeks to complete properly. When I inevitably failed to meet these artificial timelines, he would document my missed commitments in detailed email reports that copied Marcus and Patricia on every disappointing update. My weekend waitressing job at a local diner became essential for survival as my financial situation grew increasingly desperate. The contrast between my professional role as senior software architect and my evening identity as a tired server taking orders from impatient customers created a humiliating cognitive dissonance that Dylan exploited ruthlessly. He began making pointed comments about my energy levels during Monday morning meetings, suggesting that outside commitments were affecting my focus and dedication to company priorities. "I'm concerned that Sierra might be spreading herself too thin," he would announce during team meetings, his voice carrying just the right tone of sympathetic concern. "I've noticed some fatigue-related mistakes in her recent work, and I want to make sure we're supporting her properly while maintaining our quality standards." Patricia Walsh's revelation about my bonus redistribution felt like a physical blow that left me gasping for air. She delivered the news with the casual indifference of someone discussing weather patterns, explaining that unexpected infrastructure costs had required budget adjustments across multiple departments. "Your bonus allocation was temporarily redirected to cover critical system upgrades," she said without meeting my eyes. "However, we're prepared to double your originally promised amount once the Zenith deal provides additional cash flow." The manipulation was masterful in its simplicity. They dangled the promise of $40,000, enough to solve all my financial problems and secure my mother's treatment, while ensuring that I would continue working without compensation until their fraud scheme reached completion. My desperation made me vulnerable to their lies, and they exploited that vulnerability with calculated precision. Jake Morrison became my last remaining ally in the increasingly hostile work environment, but even his support came with growing risks. During one of our brief conversations in the parking garage, he shared disturbing information about Dylan's behavior that confirmed my worst suspicions. "He's been asking weird questions about your personal access codes," Jake whispered, constantly checking over his shoulder for potential eavesdroppers. "He wants to understand exactly how someone else might take over your responsibilities if you were suddenly unavailable." The isolation tactics intensified as other employees began openly questioning my competence and commitment. Conversations would stop abruptly when I entered rooms. Colleagues who had previously sought my technical advice started consulting external contractors instead of asking for my input. My suggestions during brainstorming sessions were dismissed or ignored, while identical ideas received enthusiastic support when proposed by other team members. Dylan's documentation campaign against me grew more sophisticated and comprehensive. He began recording every minor mistake I made, no matter how insignificant or easily corrected. A typo in a code comment became evidence of declining attention to detail. A delayed response to an email sent during non-business hours demonstrated poor communication skills. My requests for clarification about changing requirements were characterized as signs of confusion or inability to adapt to dynamic business needs. The gaslighting reached psychological levels that made me question my own perceptions of reality. Dylan would reference conversations that had never occurred, claim that I had agreed to deadlines I had never accepted, and insist that project requirements had been clearly communicated through channels I had never accessed. When I attempted to clarify these discrepancies, he would express concern about my memory and stress levels, while suggesting that the pressure of the Zenith deal might be affecting my cognitive function. My performance reviews, once filled with praise for innovative solutions and technical expertise, suddenly became litanies of concerns about reliability, teamwork, and professional judgment. Patricia Walsh contributed detailed assessments about my supposed inability to manage personal finances, responsibly citing my weekend employment as evidence of poor life choices that reflected badly on company culture. The trap was closing around me with terrifying efficiency, but the full extent of Dylan's scheme remained hidden until I accidentally discovered his true intentions during another late-night debugging session. While working to resolve a critical system error, I needed to access logs stored on Dylan's computer to trace the source of data corruption that was affecting platform performance. His desktop contained folders that revealed the complete architecture of my impending destruction. Detailed plans outlined exactly how my termination would unfold, including fabricated evidence of financial theft, forged performance evaluations that painted me as incompetent and untrustworthy, and a timeline that synchronized perfectly with the Zenith Capital presentation. Most devastating of all were the contracts and communication records that proved his systematic theft of my proprietary code designs. Dylan had been selling my innovations to competing companies for months, using my own technical documentation to demonstrate the value of stolen intellectual property. He had already received substantial payments for algorithms I had developed, security protocols I had implemented, and user interface designs that represented months of creative work. The buyers believed they were purchasing legitimate technology from Techflow's vice president of operations, never suspecting that they were receiving stolen goods from a criminal who planned to frame the actual creator. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Email threads showed Dylan negotiating prices for my work while simultaneously building a case for my termination on charges of corporate espionage. He planned to claim that I had stolen company property and sold trade secrets to competitors using the very transactions he had conducted as proof of my supposed crimes. As I scrolled through the detailed timeline of my planned destruction, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and terror, I realized that I had perhaps 48 hours before Dylan's scheme reached its devastating conclusion. The Christmas party would provide the perfect opportunity for my public humiliation and dismissal, creating witnesses who would remember my supposed confession of financial theft while establishing an official record of my disgrace. I copied the evidence to my personal drive and drove home through empty streets, knowing that I was about to enter the most dangerous phase of a battle where my opponents held every advantage except one. They had no idea that I understood exactly what they were planning to do to me. The Christmas party arrived with all the forced festivity of a corporate celebration designed to mask underlying tensions and competing agendas. The office had been transformed into a winter wonderland, complete with twinkling lights strung between workstations, a towering tree covered in technology-themed ornaments, and catering tables groaning under the weight of holiday treats that cost more than most employees earned in a week. I dressed carefully that evening, choosing professional attire that projected confidence despite the knowledge that I was walking into my own execution. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed someone who looked calm and composed, giving no hint of the evidence I had discovered or the confrontation that awaited me. The weight of Dylan's stolen files on my personal laptop felt like armor against the psychological warfare I knew was coming. Marcus Hendricks played the role of gracious host with practiced ease, moving through clusters of employees with wineglass in hand and sharing optimistic predictions about the company's bright future. He spoke enthusiastically about the upcoming Zenith presentation, describing it as the culmination of everyone's hard work and dedication. "This is our moment," he declared to the assembled crowd, raising his glass in a toast. "In 6 weeks, we'll be celebrating the partnership that transforms Techflow into an industry leader." Dylan held court near the punch bowl, regaling a circle of admirers with stories about innovative technical solutions that I had actually developed during countless late nights of problem-solving. He described complex algorithms with the confidence of someone who had never written a line of code, but had memorized technical terminology from industry publications. His audience hung on every word, impressed by his apparent expertise and vision. Samantha Torres worked the room with strategic precision, ensuring that key employees felt appreciated, while subtle positioning loyal allies in positions where they could witness the evening's planned drama. She complimented my dress with the kind of false warmth that corporate climbers use to disarm their targets before delivering devastating blows. Patricia Walsh remained characteristically aloof, observing the festivities with the detached calculation of an accountant tallying assets and liabilities. Her eyes tracked conversations and interactions with the focused intensity of someone who understood that every social dynamic represented potential leverage for future manipulation. Jake Morrison found me near the hors d'oeuvres table, his expression troubled by undercurrents he could sense but not fully comprehend. "Something feels off tonight," he murmured, pretending to examine the selection of cheese and crackers. "Dylan seems especially confident about something, and Patricia keeps checking her watch like she's waiting for a specific moment." The trap was sprung with theatrical precision that demonstrated months of careful planning and coordination. Marcus approached the center of the room and called for everyone's attention, tapping his wine glass with a fork to create the traditional signal for important announcements. The conversations gradually died as employees gathered around expecting holiday pleasantries or perhaps news about year-end bonuses. "Before we continue celebrating," Marcus began with a broad smile, "I want to address something important that affects all of us." He gestured toward me with what appeared to be paternal warmth. "Sierra, could you join me over here? I believe there's something we need to discuss publicly." My stomach clenched as I realized the moment of truth had arrived earlier than expected. Every pair of eyes in the room focused on me as I walked slowly toward Marcus, my mind racing through possible responses to whatever accusation they were prepared to level. The circle of colleagues opened to accommodate my approach, their faces showing curiosity mixed with the uncomfortable anticipation that accompanies witnessing someone else's professional humiliation. Marcus maintained his friendly demeanor as he delivered the opening blow. "So where's that $20,000 bonus?" he asked with theatrical concern, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. "I've been reviewing our financial records, and Patricia tells me there might be some confusion about payment processing." The question hit like a physical assault designed to suggest wrongdoing without making direct accusations. I felt heat rising in my cheeks as I processed the implications of what he was suggesting. They were positioning themselves as concerned employers, investigating potential financial irregularities, while painting me as someone who might have received unauthorized compensation. "It never hit my account," I replied honestly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. The truth was simple and verifiable, but I knew that facts would be irrelevant to the performance they were orchestrating for the benefit of their carefully selected audience. Dylan stepped forward with the righteous anger of someone who had discovered a terrible betrayal by a trusted colleague. His face flushed with theatrical outrage as he pointed an accusatory finger at me. "Liar!" he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion that seemed genuine to anyone who didn't understand his true motives. "You're fired for hiding company funds. Security will escort you out immediately." The silence that followed his pronouncement was deafening. Colleagues who had worked beside me for months stared in shock, trying to process the accusation and its implications. Some faces showed disappointment, others confusion, and a few revealed the uncomfortable satisfaction that comes from witnessing the downfall of someone they had been taught to resent. But as I looked around the room at their expectant faces, I felt something unexpected wash over me. Not fear or shame, but a strange sense of liberation. These people had exploited my dedication, stolen my work, and manipulated my desperate circumstances for their own benefit. They had planned my destruction with meticulous care, believing that I was helpless to defend myself against their coordinated attack. I reached into my purse and withdrew my keycard, holding it up for everyone to see, before placing it gently in Dylan's outstretched palm. The gesture was calm and deliberate, completely contrary to the emotional breakdown they had expected. Instead of begging for mercy or protesting my innocence, I simply smiled, an expression that seemed to unsettle Dylan far more than tears or anger would have. "Good luck with the first quarter launch," I said, clearly ensuring that every person in the room could hear my final words as a Techflow employee. The phrase sounded like a polite farewell, but Dylan's face went pale as he processed the implications of what I was really telling him. "Your entire platform goes dark tonight." The words hung in the air like a prediction of doom, but the assembled employees interpreted them as the empty threat of a disgruntled worker who had been caught stealing and was now lashing out with impotent rage. They had no way of understanding that I had just activated a security protocol that would protect them from the fraud scheme their executives were perpetrating, even as it destroyed the company that had betrayed my trust. As security guards approached to escort me from the building, I walked past my former colleagues with dignity intact, knowing that by tomorrow morning everything they thought they understood about Techflow solutions would crumble like a house of cards built on foundations of lies and stolen dreams. The December snow crunched beneath my feet as I walked across the parking lot toward my car, each step taking me further from the warm glow of the Christmas party and deeper into an uncertain future that suddenly felt full of terrifying possibilities. The security guards had followed me to ensure I left the premises, their presence a final humiliation designed to reinforce the narrative that I was a criminal being expelled from respectable society. Inside my small apartment surrounded by secondhand furniture and the medical bills that covered my kitchen table like fallen leaves, I opened my laptop and reviewed the security protocols I had implemented during the platform's reconstruction. The dual authentication system I had designed was elegant in its simplicity. It required verification from both the company's main server and the architect's personal certification to maintain system access. I had built these safeguards specifically to prevent unauthorized access to client data, knowing that any security breach could destroy both Techflow's reputation and the personal information of thousands of users who trusted their platform. The system was programmed to automatically lock down at midnight if it detected any irregularities in access patterns or if the primary architect's credentials were revoked without proper transition protocols. Dylan and his collaborators had no understanding of the technical infrastructure they were trying to manipulate. They assumed that firing me would simply remove a troublesome employee while leaving them free to exploit the platform I had rebuilt. What they failed to realize was that the security features I had implemented were designed by someone who understood the value of protecting intellectual property from the kind of theft they were attempting. My personal certification codes were stored on encrypted servers that only I could access. Without these credentials, the platform would interpret any login attempts as potential security breaches and respond by implementing comprehensive lockdown procedures. The executive team had just severed their own access to the system they planned to demonstrate to Zenith Capital in less than 72 hours. By Saturday morning, my phone was ringing with a desperation I could hear even before answering the call. Jake Morrison's voice carried panic that he was trying unsuccessfully to mask with professional calm. "Sierra, thank God you picked up," he said without preamble. "The entire platform is down. Nobody can access anything. Not the demo environment, not the client databases, not even the basic user interface. The executive team is in complete meltdown mode." Through Jake's description, I could visualize the chaos erupting in Techflow's offices as employees discovered that their revolutionary technology had become completely inaccessible overnight. Development teams couldn't retrieve code repositories. Sales staff couldn't demonstrate basic functionality to potential clients. Customer service representatives couldn't access support databases to resolve user issues. "Dylan's been screaming at the IT department for 6 straight hours," Jake continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that suggested he was hiding from potential eavesdroppers. "He keeps demanding that they override the security protocols, but nobody understands how your systems actually work. Patricia brought in external consultants, but they can't penetrate the encryption without your personal authorization codes." The irony was beautiful in its symmetry. The same security measures I had designed to protect Techflow from external threats were now protecting my intellectual property from internal theft. Dylan could demand access all he wanted, but the platform would only respond to properly authenticated requests from authorized personnel, a category that no longer included anyone currently employed by the company. Marcus attempted to salvage the situation through direct negotiation, calling my personal phone number with offers that revealed the true extent of their desperation. His voice had lost all traces of the confident leadership he had displayed during the Christmas party, replaced by barely concealed panic that made him sound like a different person entirely. "Sierra, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." He began, his tone suggesting that my termination had been some kind of bureaucratic error rather than a calculated attack on my reputation. Dylan was under tremendous stress about the Zenith presentation, and I believe he may have overreacted to what was obviously a simple accounting discrepancy. "We'd like to offer you your position back with full benefits and immediate payment of your promised bonus." I listened to his increasingly frantic proposals with the detached curiosity of someone observing a natural disaster from a safe distance. He offered salary increases, stock options, executive titles, and eventually direct cash payments that far exceeded my original compensation package. Each escalating offer revealed new depths of their predicament, while confirming that they had no technical solution to the crisis they had created. "I appreciate the offer," I replied calmly, "but after being publicly accused of theft and having my reputation destroyed in front of my colleagues, I don't think Techflow is the right environment for my career development. I'm sure you'll find someone else who can meet your technical needs." Dylan's attempts at intimidation proved even less effective than his father's desperate negotiations. He left voicemail messages threatening legal action for sabotage and corporate espionage, apparently unaware that his own computer contained evidence of the very crimes he was now accusing me of committing. His threats became increasingly unhinged as the reality of their situation penetrated his entitled worldview. Patricia Walsh's call revealed a calculating intelligence that recognized the legal implications of their predicament more clearly than her male colleagues understood. She spoke carefully, avoiding direct admissions while probing for weaknesses in my position. "This situation benefits no one," she said with the cold logic of someone who had spent her career managing corporate crises. "Surely we can find a mutually beneficial resolution that protects everyone's interests." But even Patricia's sophisticated approach couldn't overcome the fundamental problem they faced. I was no longer bound by the financial desperation that had made me vulnerable to their manipulation. The public accusation of theft had freed me from any loyalty to people who had never deserved my dedication in the first place. Sunday brought news that transformed their technical crisis into an existential threat to the company's survival. Zenith Capital's technical team had arrived early for preliminary testing of the platform they were considering for a $90 million investment. The discovery of a completely non-functional system raised immediate questions about Techflow's competence, honesty, and viability as a business partner. Jake's final call painted a picture of corporate apocalypse that would have been satisfying if it weren't so complete in its devastation. Zenith's representatives were demanding explanations for technical failures that Techflow couldn't provide. Media outlets were picking up rumors about platform instability. Competitors were reaching out to Techflow's existing clients with alternative solutions. "The Zenith team thinks we lied about our capabilities," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible over what sounded like shouting in the background. "They're threatening to pull the entire investment if we can't demonstrate basic functionality by tomorrow morning. Marcus looks like he's aged 10 years since Friday night." As I prepared for bed Sunday evening, knowing that Monday would bring the final collapse of everything Techflow had built on lies and stolen innovation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine peace about my professional future and complete confidence that justice was finally being served. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp winter sunshine that made everything look clean and full of possibility, a sharp contrast to the chaos that was about to engulf Techflow Solutions as their carefully constructed house of cards finally collapsed under the weight of its own deception. I woke up refreshed for the first time in months, knowing that today would bring either vindication or complete destruction, but either way the truth would finally emerge. Marcus's morning phone call carried the desperation of a drowning man grasping for any available lifeline. His voice cracked with emotion as he made offers that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. $50,000, he said without preamble, abandoning any pretense of negotiation. "I'll wire it to your account this morning if you'll just come in and help us restore the platform. No questions asked, no explanations required, just please help us save this deal." The magnitude of his offer revealed how completely their situation had deteriorated overnight. They were prepared to pay more than twice my annual bonus just for a few hours of technical support, which meant that the Zenith presentation was their last hope for survival. Without that $90 million investment, Techflow would collapse under the weight of obligations they couldn't meet and promises they couldn't keep. "I appreciate your generous offer," I replied with genuine politeness, "but I've decided to pursue other opportunities that better align with my professional values. I'm sure your technical team will find a solution that doesn't require my involvement." Dylan's attempts to hack the security protocols had only made their situation worse, corrupting backup systems and triggering additional lockdown mechanisms that I had designed to prevent exactly this kind of unauthorized access. His amateur efforts to bypass professional-grade encryption had created new problems that would take weeks to resolve, even with expert assistance. The industry blogs picked up the story by Tuesday morning, and the coverage was brutal in its efficiency. Techflow's spectacular failure became a cautionary tale about startup culture, executive incompetence, and the dangers of building businesses on technological foundations that key personnel controlled. The narrative painted Dylan as an entitled heir whose arrogance had destroyed his father's company, while positioning me as an innocent victim of corporate greed and mismanagement. Competitors sensed weakness and moved quickly to exploit Techflow's vulnerability. Existing clients received calls from alternative providers, offering immediate solutions to replace the platform that had suddenly become unreliable. Industry conferences that had previously welcomed Marcus as a keynote speaker quietly removed his name from promotional materials. The media attention attracted the notice of employment attorneys who specialized in wrongful termination and workplace harassment cases. Sarah Chen from Morrison & Associates reached out Wednesday morning with news that fundamentally changed my understanding of the legal landscape I was navigating. "I've been following your case through industry channels," she explained during our initial consultation. "Multiple former Techflow employees have contacted our firm with similar stories about Dylan Hendrick's behavior. You have strong grounds for wrongful termination, defamation, and possibly conspiracy to commit fraud. The witnesses she described painted a pattern of abuse that extended far beyond my individual experience. Dylan had systematically targeted talented employees who posed threats to his authority using similar tactics of isolation gaslighting and public humiliation to force their resignation or create justification for their termination. My case was simply the most recent and most visible example of behavior that had been ongoing for years. Security footage from the Christmas party provided irrefutable evidence that Dylan's accusations had been baseless and deliberately designed to humiliate me in front of colleagues. The recording showed his theatrical outrage was completely inconsistent with his calm, calculated behavior just moments before the confrontation. No reasonable person could watch the footage and conclude that his reaction was spontaneous or based on genuine discovery of wrongdoing. Thursday brought news that transformed the investigation from a civil employment matter into a criminal case with federal implications. FBI agents from the Corporate Fraud Division arrived at Techflow's offices with search warrants and forensic accountants responding to complaints from Zenith Capital about potential securities fraud. The federal investigation revealed the full scope of Dylan's criminal enterprise. He had been systematically stealing intellectual property from multiple employees, not just me, and selling their innovations to competitors through a network of shell companies designed to obscure the source of the stolen technology. The profits from these sales had been hidden in offshore accounts that he planned to access after destroying the careers of the people who had created the valuable technology. Marcus, despite his claims of ignorance about his son's activities, faced charges for allowing fraudulent financial statements to be presented to investors under his signature as chief executive officer. The SEC investigation revealed that he had known about discrepancies in user statistics and revenue projections, but had chosen to present inflated numbers to Zenith Capital anyway. Patricia Walsh's cooperation with federal investigators provided the detailed financial records that prosecutors needed to build comprehensive cases against both Marcus and Dylan. Her plea bargain revealed the sophisticated money laundering operation that had been used to hide stolen technology sales while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. The vindication felt surreal after months of gaslighting and psychological manipulation. Federal agents confirmed that my security protocols had actually prevented Zenith Capital from investing $90 million in a fraudulent enterprise, potentially saving them from massive financial losses and legal liability as victims of securities fraud. Jake Morrison joined the growing list of former Techflow employees who were cooperating with investigators and sharing their experiences of Dylan's systematic abuse. His testimony about the hostile work environment and deliberate sabotage of my performance reviews provided crucial context for understanding how the criminal scheme had operated under the cover of normal business activities. The company's collapse accelerated through the final weeks of December as legal bills mounted, clients fled, and media coverage attracted the attention of additional regulatory agencies. Techflow's offices were sealed by federal marshals, pending the completion of asset forfeiture proceedings related to the criminal investigations. By New Year's Eve, I was reviewing job offers from 3 different companies that had learned about my situation through industry connections and professional networks. My reputation as an innovative architect who had maintained ethical standards under extreme pressure made me a valuable asset to organizations that prioritized integrity over short-term profits. The best offer came from an unexpected source, Zenith Capital itself, which had been sufficiently impressed by my technical skills and moral courage to offer me a position as chief security architect with their portfolio companies. The salary was double what Techflow had promised, plus equity participation that could provide long-term financial security for both me and my mother. As I prepared to start the new year with genuine optimism about my professional future, I reflected on how the worst betrayal of my career had ultimately become the catalyst for opportunities I never would have pursued if Dylan hadn't forced me to recognize my own worth and strength. 6 months later, I stood in the gleaming conference room of Zenith Capital's headquarters presenting the final security assessment for their latest portfolio acquisition to a board of directors who hung on every word of my technical recommendations. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same investors who had nearly fallen victim to Techflow's fraudulent scheme now trusted me to protect their interests from similar deceptions. The federal cases against Marcus and Dylan Hendricks had concluded with sentences that reflected the seriousness of their crimes and the harm they had inflicted on both investors and employees. Dylan received 2 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments to the companies that had unknowingly purchased stolen intellectual property. His conviction for corporate espionage, securities fraud, and money laundering ensured that no legitimate technology company would ever employ him again. Marcus's sentence was lighter due to his cooperation with investigators and his age, but the destruction of his reputation was complete and permanent. The man who had once commanded respect as a Silicon Valley veteran now worked as a freelance consultant for small businesses, his name permanently associated with one of the most spectacular startup failures in recent memory. Patricia Walsh's plea bargain had resulted in probation and community service, but her career in corporate finance was effectively over. The detailed records she had maintained of the company's fraudulent activities became the foundation for new SEC regulations designed to prevent similar schemes from deceiving sophisticated investors. My wrongful termination lawsuit had been settled out of court for an amount that exceeded my original salary by several multiples. More important than the financial compensation was the formal acknowledgement that Dylan's accusations had been false, and that my termination had been retaliatory punishment for refusing to participate in illegal activities. The settlement agreement included a public statement from Techflow's bankruptcy trustee acknowledging my integrity and technical competence, effectively restoring the professional reputation that Dylan had tried so hard to destroy. Industry publications covered the story as a cautionary tale about corporate fraud, but also as an inspiring example of an employee who had chosen ethical principles over financial security. My mother's health had improved dramatically, with access to the experimental treatments that my new financial situation made possible. The stress of unpaid medical bills and uncertain employment had been replaced by gratitude for the opportunities that had emerged from what initially seemed like complete professional disaster. Working for Zenith Capital had connected me with brilliant colleagues who shared my commitment to innovation, tempered by ethical responsibility. The portfolio companies I advised benefited from security architectures that protected both their intellectual property and their clients' sensitive data, creating value through genuine technological advancement rather than fraudulent marketing schemes. Jake Morrison had also found new opportunities after Techflow's collapse, joining a startup founded by former colleagues who valued his technical skills and collaborative approach. We had begun dating after months of friendship built on shared experiences of workplace trauma and mutual respect for each other's professional integrity. The relationship developed naturally from our common understanding of how toxic environments could undermine good people's confidence in their own perceptions. We both carried emotional scars from Dylan's psychological manipulation, but we were healing together while building something based on honesty and mutual support. My new apartment reflected the financial stability I had achieved through perseverance and refusal to compromise my principles. The spacious rooms were filled with furniture I had chosen, rather than accepted, books that inspired, rather than escaped, and artwork that celebrated beauty, rather than masked pain. The most meaningful change was psychological, rather than material. I had learned to trust my instincts about people and situations, recognizing manipulation tactics before they could undermine my confidence. The experience of being systematically gaslighted and professionally sabotaged had taught me to value colleagues who demonstrated integrity through their actions rather than their words. Industry conferences now invited me to speak about cybersecurity and corporate ethics, sharing lessons learned from my experience with Techflow's criminal enterprise. These presentations consistently drew standing ovations from audiences who appreciated practical guidance about maintaining professional standards under pressure. The speaking engagements had led to consulting opportunities with companies that wanted to implement security protocols designed by someone who understood both technical vulnerabilities and human motivations for exploiting them. My fees for these projects often exceeded my former annual salary, creating multiple income streams that provided genuine financial independence. Most importantly, I had discovered that being fired from a job that was destroying my health and ethics was actually liberation from a toxic situation that would have continued degrading my well-being indefinitely. Dylan's attack had forced me to recognize that I deserved better treatment and had valuable skills that ethical organizations would reward appropriately. The Christmas party confrontation that had seemed like the worst moment of my professional life was actually the beginning of everything good that followed. Without Dylan's betrayal, I would never have discovered my own strength, pursued opportunities with ethical organizations, or built relationships with people who respected my contributions. The deep life lesson that emerged from this experience was that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters and what we're actually capable of achieving when we stop accepting mistreatment for the sake of false security. Integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about having the courage to walk away from situations that compromise our values even when the immediate consequences seem devastating. True success comes not from enduring abuse to maintain employment, but from having enough self-respect to demand better treatment and enough confidence in our abilities to pursue opportunities that align with our principles. The most devastating betrayal can become the greatest gift if it forces us to stop settling for less than we deserve. My story proves that standing up for yourself, even when it seems like professional suicide, can actually open doors to opportunities you never knew existed. Sometimes the worst day of your career becomes the catalyst for the best decision you ever made, transforming apparent disaster into unexpected triumph through the simple act of refusing to accept what others believe you should tolerate. Have you ever found yourself in a workplace where you knew something wasn't right, but felt trapped by financial pressures or fear of retaliation? I'd love to hear your stories about standing up for your values when it felt impossible. Your experiences might inspire someone else who's facing a similar situation right now. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up to help others find it when they need encouragement to trust their instincts. Consider subscribing for more real-life stories about overcoming workplace challenges and finding strength in difficult situations. And please share this with anyone who might need a reminder that their integrity is worth more than any job that compromises their values. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to triumph. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond when your principles are tested. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from walking away with your dignity intact, trusting that better opportunities await those who refuse to compromise their souls for temporary security.